Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8:30 a.m. to 9 o'clock a.m. session of the 2025 Open Simulator Community Conference. In this session, we are pleased to introduce the presentation, MetaCulture equals Metagaming plus Integrated Knowledge Infrastructures. Our speaker is Indy Bio. Indy Bio is sci-curious, trained as a bioprocess engineer, interested in interfaces and the spaces between. Inside the lines, outside the box. Passions include building connection across boundaries, balancing a feminist ethic of care with critical accountability, and pursuing responsive infrastructures at appropriate scales. Please check out the website found at conference.opensimulator.org for speaker bios, details of sessions, and the full schedule of events. This session's being live streamed and recorded, so if you have questions or comments during the session, you may send tweets to @OpenSimCC with the hashtag #OSCC25. Welcome, everyone, and let's begin the session.
Thank you very much. As you can tell by my avatar, I'm a newbie to these parts, so thank you everyone for organizing this amazing thing. So my name in the physical world is Bernal, and in the metaverse I go by Indie Bio, Indie as in indie rock, and bio as in biology. I'm a biologist by training. I ended up in bioprocess engineering and urban resource management. So I am not a native to these parts, as you can tell by the hippo. And I live mainly in text and offline. So one could say I am in one dimensional, not even 3D. But my interest in the metaverse is the meta part of it, rather than the visual or the virtual. It's the interoperability of data, cultures, ideologies, disciplines, the physical with the digital, basically everything. So why am I here? I volunteer a lot. It's how I learn and make friends. I've joined my local communities, looking after natural areas where I lived. I used to organize events like local park runs and TEDx. I was curator of TEDx Cape Town. I've organized conferences, so I know what the team here is going through. I was chair of a few things, and currently I am involved in the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, also known as OMI or OMI. We have a panel in about an hour and a half from now. And through my work, both professionally and volunteering, or work and play, I became intrigued by the social dynamics of community-driven knowledge networks. So, things like OpenStreetMaps, Debian, Linux, the metaverse. I'm particularly interested in intractable challenges, things that just do not have a solution. And because of my scientific background and interests, I'm focused on politically charged scientific challenges, like climate change, like the COVID pandemic. How people believe things when our idea of the facts as so called experts may indicate otherwise. The background to what I'm going to tell you about today and ask for help on is that we have so much data. It's a mess. It's a mess on a whole lot of levels, and the technical approach to that, integrating that data, integrating knowledge infrastructures, is an ongoing project. And it also has a home in OMI, but it's the interaction with that data, or rather the lack thereof, by everyday people that I want to focus on here. Because of the bigness of this data, and one could say the necessity of visualizing it, there is a digital and likely an immersive component to it, the idea of the metaverse that many people have. So big data has been a thing for a while, but I really hit the wall during an extreme drought where I lived in Cape Town, South Africa, when we just weren't moving the needle as so-called experts. Cape Town was 2 weeks away from a city of 4.5 million people running out of water. Right now, Iran and Turkey and other places have already run out of water. They're talking about evacuation. Evacuation to where? I don't know. So, looking towards the global response and actions or not, towards climate change and the political climate, it's clear that this is a huge problem. It's like it's like a world changing event, that we're living in interesting times. We need people to act from the bottom up while staying accountable. So let's be very clear. I am not advocating for anarchy or a revolution or working outside our laws and our legal systems. I'm working on a careful community approach, balancing a feminist ethic of care, so balancing an ethic of justice with an ethic of care, with critical accountability, and pursuing responsive infrastructures at appropriate scales. Often that means more decentralized, more grassroots. Technically, this is possible, and scaling it to spread across the globe is possible, especially through the metaverse. Imagine local action facilitated by this digital network that surrounds us and connects us. I was stuck on the social side of things. We need to get people to care in the first place. So I started reading and reading and reading about what to do about it. And this is my attempt to act on what I've learned so far. And please remember, I'm a scientist by training. I'm heading into the humanities now. I have no idea what I'm doing. So, the need that I'm basing this project in, obviously, this could be applied anyway, but focus is always good. And so, specifically, I'm looking at volunteer communities like Open Simulator, like the Open Metaverse or the Metaverse in general, that are not as welcoming as we would like to think. You know, as organizers of these groups, we always say, oh, we're so welcome and everyone's welcome, but we know that that's not really true. And I felt bad about this. I wanted to make it better. And I think this is very much related to how to address misinformation across the internet. It's related to echo chambers, flame wars, and the algorithm. We try to have conversations with people and include people, but more often than not, we end up fighting or being patronizing or being uninspired, being educational, quote unquote, which means we talk down at people and don't allow their views to be shared. Now, look, there's a time and a place for being educational and being the expert when someone's invited you to teach them, for example. But when you're having a conversation with someone who's just like you know, in the internet or whatever, you're as equals. There's no room for being, let's just call it uninspired. And so behaving in this way ends up chasing people away, even when our intentions are good, rather than letting them in and growing the community. So I started thinking, can game culture thinking help? And what would this mean? And so I ventured into a new area. And as I said many times, this presentation is really about asking for help to build my research. So in this particular case, yes, you do have permission to be patronizing and educational to me. So I read there's specific works that I found particularly inspiring. Carol Gilligan on her work on ending patriarchy, on bringing into association what we've forgotten. Naomi Klein, I think her book was called Mirror Worlds, but it was on constructively engaging with misinformation. Anand Giridharadas on building connection across divisions. The one thing that kept coming up in all of these was cultivating curiosity, not relying on people's curiosity, not teaching them things, but growing that curiosity, creating a sense of cognitive dissonance to playfully explore. In the blog post that I'm working, there's a couple of gaps here, which I will fill in due course. But so far so good. So, and this applies to AI, and I think we'll talk about this in the panel a bit later. And the keynote session, the state of the hypergrid, also talked about this. I think it was Sun Tzu who talked about keeping the human in the loop with AI. It's not about whether something is good or bad. It's about playfully introducing cognitive dissonance, effectively training people to follow the scientific method of inquiry, being questioning without being judgmental. So there's some academic research that backs this up. There was Tim Harford wrote a beautiful article, and there was also another one by someone whose link I've now lost. But the academic research around that was by Kahan and others. And there was also, oh, now I've lost it. Yeah, so I'm basing it around this being able to cultivate curiosity. And so there is some academic work that backs this up. And then how I plan to do this is through a method called deep canvassing, and which would be adapted to be digital and self-guided, and using knowledge infrastructures to apply in a scientific context. So that's the methodology in a nutshell, and I could carry on for a long time about that, but really, I don't really know what I'm doing. So if this interests you at all, please reach out, and we'll get back to the call to action. Another thing that I mentioned in the title is metagaming, being curious beyond the game itself. I just went on a web search to find the original article, and the article that I found was by a group in Finland headed by Kahila and others. But I also found a bunch of links that were like, oh, why metagaming is bad. And so I haven't read it yet, but of course, the internet being the internet, there's always two sides to the story. But I think metagaming is or could be a good thing. To me, something like Open Simulator Community Conference is an example of a metagame. It's something that is meta to, or in addition to, the Open Simulator itself. Having forums, having networks, any sort of thing that is outside of the game is a metagame. And I think this has potential to build that curiosity. If you think of the life that we lead and the physical world that we exhibit as the game, or the scientific challenge as the game, the metagaming is how we cultivate that curiosity. And then this links to me to convergence culture. So this is something that Henry Jenkins spoke about a long time ago, and it's quite bizarre to me how relevant it is. The book originally, Convergence Culture, was written in 2006, I think. And it's still so relevant. It's really weird. And so what I'm thinking about a lot is why didn't that grow? Why didn't that scale? And Henry speaks about how the corporate sort of takeover and the walled garden sort of stymied that a bit. And I feel like we have an opportunity with the metaverse to reimagine that. But this idea of growing from broadcast, as in traditional media, to communication, which is how we work these days, transforms audiences into active participants in the experience. And interestingly, when we were having a chat, preparing for the panel that's happening in an hour or so, this also links to improv, how we use the experience of playing together to really address and make space for social action. But I think for more on that, join us in the OMI panel in about an hour. So then on the other side is the knowledge infrastructures and integrating that into this cultural sort of vibe. So what a knowledge infrastructure means is all the stuff that collates data or knowledge or information. For me, that's things like Wikipedia and OpenStreetMaps, the sort of projects that we know as collective gathering, but it's also very scientific things. So there's things like eModnet, Destiny, there's Copernicus, and these are mainly Europe-based. I think NOAA is one of the US-based, but like these massive, massive data sets of how our world functions. And what is built from those are, weather modeling, but it's also just cool stuff. It just looks good. But there's literally thousands of knowledge databases and whatever collections of data that contains those. And experts, or so-called experts, use those to make decisions about our world. The climate change models. There's a bunch of models that underpin that. But everyday people don't really work with that. It also includes local data in the same way that OpenStreetMaps work. And so I hope, my dream is that we can create these databases for water, for resources, whatever people want, in the same way that OpenStreetMaps work. Let's call it an open resource maps. And my ultimate dream with this is to integrate the physical world into games. Not for education, not for fun, just to cultivate curiosity. Because we're also interested in interoperability, being part of OMI, the Open Metaverse Interoperability Group, this means, of course, that it can also be used for education, as a framework or whatever technical words you want to use. It could be used for serious stuff, but my passion really is to use it for fun. And so why am I talking about culture and then, bringing in this knowledge infrastructure thing in all the time? For me, to put it together into a meta-culture, putting the metagaming with the integrated knowledge cultures gives a case study, a focus to work with. To have a culture, you sort of need a community. That's why there's different cultures. And so what does this community or this culture in a metaverse look like? So we're testing this with a project that starts early next year with water as its basis. It's called AquaSavvy. And we're working on a proposal to do this with biosphere reserves globally. But other than the specific case study or having a focus to apply this to, it's important because culture does not exist in a vacuum. So you need a community, and metaculture is about the culture that emerges when we cross those communities, when we move between them, when we can't rely on the unspoken agreements that keep a community together. How do we navigate this culture when the dominant language is not English, for example? I mean, time zones is hard enough. when we don't know what the basics are. We talk about being professional, being nice, being respectful, but that has a specific meaning depending on where you come from. How do we navigate this? We have been toying with this as a community in the furry community, with avatars and how they present, how we present with pronouns. So this is it's a ripe moment in time to examine this. But I think it could go a lot further, and that's what I'm excited to contribute to. I've been learning so much from this community. How do we apply that to science? How do we apply that to the climate changes? And it feels like these are still two different planets, and I would like to build bridges between those. And so that is what my project is about. So finally, call to action. As I said, I'm very new to this, so please help. Any sort of academic references, any potentially relevant research groups, chat groups, activist groups, communities, anything at all, please let me know. I'd love to meet with you. I'd love to have this conversation. We have a dedicated forum in the OMI Discord, and so that is the QR code that you see on the slide. So that's a place to come and have a chat to us. But I'll meet you where you are. Let me know where you are. You're also welcome to get in touch with me. Like, I'm indie bio basically everywhere: Discord, GitHub, anyway. My blog shares the warts and all journey. Sometimes it's very half baked. Mostly it's very half baked. But hey, that's me. We're growing. And then you may also be interested in our AquaSavvy project that's starting next year. I think I didn't include that on the slide, but if you look at the blog post, it's right at the bottom. It's basically aquasavvy.eu. And I think that's me. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope this made sense.
I do see that there is someone asking for the invite link, and Lear just pointed out that it is in the QR code. So I'm
Great.
going to, okay, there we go. And someone says I can get that for you because I'm concerned maybe somebody's having trouble with the QR code on their screen. I know sometimes that happens to me. So if someone can help us with that, that's great. Right now, I don't, I'm waiting for other questions to come in. What I'm curious to know, if it's okay, is you've talked a lot about what your passions are and how you want to bring it to this philosophy, but in meeting with a lot of people on the open simulator grids, I found that their personal passion is then key to how it translates out. I'm curious if you're okay with it. Can you give us an idea of how you decided on the biosciences being your passion to then make the leap into what you're talking about?
In a word, frustration. Um, I was working on um, I was a curator. I was chair for a an advisory group for the protection of an estuary, coastal region where I lived. And it was just so incredibly frustrating because I couldn't get people to see the different things that we were talking about. And there was so much information that people's head just exploded every time we tried to talk about it. Um, and I think, my partner is a software developer, and I was sort of, in this, I was, yeah, I was in Debian and Ubuntu, and I sort of seeing how people across the world were working together, sort of in the internet. And yes, there were frustrations. I mean, we complain about all the frustrations that they had, but they sort of had a way to deal with big complex challenges in a way that I felt like the sciences didn't. And so I am a scientist, so that's sort of where that's home to me. Biology and water is home to me. But then and you look at communities with um, cosplayers and LARPers, and it's like they have so much fun. And then I think I was reading about the people who manage, I think it was World of Warcraft. So I think that was Nick Yee's book, where they had this entire community managing stuff, doing like 8-hour working days on something they weren't getting paid on, and they were just so passionate about it. And I was like, I want that. Like, scientists aren't that passionate about stuff. I want that. How do I get that? Like, they're playing a game, and it's sort of meta to the game that they're doing this. I want that. And so I started thinking, how do we bring these two together? Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Absolutely fantastic. And we've had one come in the meantime. Lisa Laxton would like to know what you found to be your greatest challenge so far.
Um, yeah, I think my greatest challenge is also linked to why I think I'm pretty good at this. Getting people to understand across the boundaries. You know, if you speak to a scientist about building a game, like either they're gonna just roll their eyes and their eyes glaze over, or they're gonna go, "Oh yeah, like a serious game. Yes, we can target schools." And then it's like, "Oh no, that's not what I want." Um, and it was interesting when I think the sort of um key illustrative example was when I went to the OpenStreetMap State of the Map conference in 2022, I think. So I've been getting stuck with this for a while. I was asking them, what sort of is anyone building games on this? Using real world data and using OpenStreetMaps and stuff. And there's a wiki link on games that they do, but it's oh god, it's also boring. And I just realized there was such um a boundary, and I wrote this down in a way more elegant way that I'm going to manage to get it up now. But instead of a walled garden of corporate stuff, there was this walled garden of thinking. And I mean, scientists are going to hate me, but it feels like there's this patronizing, but I'm an expert, you should listen to me. And the people on the street, everyday people have no reason to listen to us as experts anymore. And I feel like the challenge that I'm having is that the experts themselves don't get this. And how to navigate it, because you can't say that to their face, right? And also, if I'm looking for funding, like I'm looking at the research funding because that's what I'm familiar with, you cannot write that into a proposal. And so navigating that in a way that keeps your diverse audiences engaged, that's the ongoing challenge. And I think that directly relates to the panel that we're having, I think in I don't know how 40 minutes from now, because it is an interoperability of cultures there, of wildly different cultures. So yeah, that's definitely the biggest challenge. But I think also that's like a massive opportunity, right?
Yeah. So on the other side of that, I know you said that this is new and in its infancy for you, but what so far has been your biggest win, either to the project or for yourself?
Honestly, I think it's landing this AquaSavvy project. It was in water, and I was concerned that it was going to be too pigeonholed into a scientific thing. And we have I think a consortium of 8 people, and at least 4 of them are very staunch academics. Who's used to doing things their way. But then we also brought in what I call metaverse technology. So we have the system of systems data integration. We also have AI tools. Um, and it's like I went to them with this crazy dream, and they liked it. So we've literally been sending hundreds of emails to people trying to explain this. And if you have one, I'm going to sound like Lady Gaga now. If you have one person who believes in you, that's all that matters. I think a big win was learning about Dr. Kim Nevelstein's IPSME approach, where it doesn't rely on like standards are important, right? But if people aren't going to want to use standards, or if the standards are so different, if you consider, does open geospatial standards relate to Blender standards? Like they probably do, but it's not quite the same thing. But so he had this integration technology, which to me just really felt like a feminist approach to technology. So that was like a big win to me. And then being able to land this project, just being able that someone says, "Hey, yeah, this sounds crazy, but we'll fund it." And then throughout the course of this project, to be able to build a tool that we can start showing people what we mean, rather than trying to describe it, because it's one of those things that describing it doesn't really get it across.
Okay. I know that you mentioned that you're looking for help in so many different areas, but what if you could have anything on your wish list right now, what would be the biggest thing?
Honestly, money. I've sort of run out, and the project doesn't have a salary in it for me. Um, okay, no, I mean there's several answers to that. The one is I'd love to do a postdoc on this in a group that understands this sort of thing. I'm waiting for one more application to come back, and then maybe I have it, maybe I don't. Collaboration with groups. We're busy with another proposal applying this to a global collection of biosphere reserves, and then bringing in libraries as the custodians of the commons. Yeah, and this is something that another OMI member, Astral Druid, talks about a lot. And I think she has great ideas there. She talks about a ludic production system. So being able to apply that. And so, people who's willing to collaborate on projects. And the reason why I like applying for research or, it could be competitions or anything is it gives you a clear focus that you have to comply to. It gives you clear boundaries and a clear deadline. And so, yeah, I'd like to, let's get in touch and let's enter competitions and stuff because that's a great way to focus your mind. It may not be the whole big dream, but it may be a component of the dream that you can start getting into specifics.
Okay. Still looking. I'm going through the chat to see if there's anything in particular else that anybody's wanting to know. Is there anything that's come to you in the meantime that you would like to add that maybe you didn't fit in earlier?
No, I think I covered it. Thank you very much. And I think for continuing conversations, the OMI Discord to me is home, and that's the place where we sort of have these big conversations. And so if anyone wants to jump in, that's a good place to carry on the conversation.
Hey, good to know. So with that, I guess I'm waiting to see if there's any more things. Nope. Absolutely want to make sure everybody got their chance. So with that, Indie Bio, I thank you very much for spending your time with us. This has been a very informative and interesting presentation. As
Thank,
someone who also has the same interest in gaming, you've made me think about ways to apply this that I hadn't thought about before. So that's a personal takeaway for me. So again, thank you so much, IndieBio, for an informative and interesting presentation. And as a reminder to our audience, you will want to check out conference at opensimulator.org to see what's coming up on the conference schedule. And you won't want to miss our next session, which will begin at 9:30 a.m. right here in this keynote region, entitled Embodied Conversational AI. Also, we encourage you to visit the OSCC 25 Poster Expo in the OSCC Expo 3 region to find accompanying information on presentations and explore the Hypergrid Tour resources in OSCC Expo 2 region, along with sponsor and crowdfunder booths that are located throughout all of the OCC Expo regions. Thank you again to the speakers and to our audience.